Hello students, Mr. Rowell here with another Java tutorial on file input-output. In this tutorial, I'm going to be guiding you through the scenario of setting up our ability to write to a file, particularly for the exercises I've assigned you when we're creating the file utility class. Now, there's some strange things that can happen when we're writing to files that we need to be aware of so that we avoid causing ourselves undue headaches and issues while writing to files. So I'm going to show you what can happen and how we can strategically avoid it. That is going to help you be able to, I think, work with your data in your own projects and exercises a little bit better. What I've set up here is a new project, and in it I have a method that I'm calling writeText that receives a file name, and then I'm going to be processing or outputting information to this file name, writing text to it. So I've defined the local file here, gathering the file name. I'll construct that later on. And right now I'm just going to recap how I construct the try-catch block to be able to print out output to a file. So let's add our IO exception. We're going to print out to the console that exception if it arrives. And I've already imported up here my IO exception in the first place. And now I need to try something to do so. So I'm going to create my file writer. And my print writer. Using that file writer. And I want to show you a little something we can do after this import's done to save ourselves a little bit of code in the future. Feel free to use this if you'd like to, but there's by no means a reason that you must. I am only using this file writer as kind of an intermediary. I'm never going to access this directly. I don't think I'm going to use this for any particular methods. If you were going to, then you'd want to leave it as is. But if it's just meant to be the middleman between the file and the print writer, we can actually use the creation of this in the attribute send in the constructor here. Here's how I do this. I'm actually not going to reference an object because I won't in the same way be constructing one. I'm going to take this new file writer, receiving the information from the file, and put it in the constructor for my print writer. I've now taken those two lines down to one, and it's going to work just fine for me in this way. I kind of like it. It simplifies the look of the code a bit. Looks kind of neat to put it all together like that. Let's move on to the next step. What I want to do is I want to write some information to a file. And here's what we're going to be looking at. Our all words dictionary. I've made a copy of it for reasons that we'll see in a minute here. I'm going to open this up in Notepad++. It's a more advanced version of Notepad. And if you've taken a peek at this in normal Notepad, you might notice that it looks a bit different. This is because in regular Notepad, it has limited functionality. It looks like all the words are crunched together next to one another in Notepad, when actually there's more data involved in this file, which is that each individual word is on its own line. That's what allows our next method to actually work properly when we're scanning the information. But just so you know, in case you don't see that in your own Notepad that you open, this is actually stored as data, one line per word. And we can see it right here. I'm going to be writing some information to this file, at least that's my goal, to experiment with what happens when we write to a file that already exists. So I'm going to output a message. Let's say print line, something like, let's see where this ends up. Try and take a guess at what you think is going to happen. When I print this to that file, all words, is it going to put this text at the start of the file? Is it going to append it to the end of the file? Is it going to replace some of the information in the file? What do you think is going to happen? We're going to test it out in a sec here, but before we move on, I actually need to take this output and ensure that after my logic is done, I close it off. Oops. I'm going to clean up my organization here a little bit. So I got this try-catch block up and running. Everything looks good inside my method. All that's left for me to do is to actually access it in my main here. So I'm going to be writing text where to, make sure I got the word right, all words, plural. Just don't want to forget any little typos here. All words.text. When I run this, it's going to send that file into my method, and it's going to print output to that file this message. Let's run this. and then go over here and see what's happened. Remember what your guess was? Let's see where this ends up. Where did the dictionary go? Well, the sad news is that you've actually fully overridden the file. By outputting to it, we've basically gotten rid of all the information that was already in this, and we've told Java that we're fully replacing it with new information. Anytime you write to a file, this is what's naturally going to happen. Java is going to assume that we just want to override all the information in it. The best way around this is to actually create a temporary local storage of the data that we can recover later if we want to replace it in the file, or another option is simply creating a new copy of the file to mess around with, to output to, and leave the original file in its original state. This is where creating a copy is going to come in handy. And actually what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to delete this one we just messed around with and just relabel this, all words. So this is my dictionary in the state that we're used to looking at it. All the words are in here, the full dictionary. I'll just prove it to you real quick. Everything's still in there. It's still called all words. And I'm going to create a new method that instead of writing text to the file, it's going to be a little bit more clever. I'm going to call this, for now, copy. This is how I'm going to create a copy of the file. And then I can maybe play around with editing the contents of the copy, because whatever I override is going to change everything. So I still want to have a copy around to be able to work with if I do further edits in the future, or if I want to try a whole bunch of different methods out. In here, I'm going to be expecting two files, file A and file B. I'm going to be using file A as the file that I have already. In this case, that would be all words, and file B, the new file that I'm going to copy the information to. So inside this method, I'm going to define file1 as being a new file that I'm getting the information from file A, and file2 will be a new file with the information from file B. Could be a new file in this case. Create a new try-catch block. Try and whip this out really quick here. Don't know why it jumps in sometimes and not other times. Throw my IO exception. Print out if there's any errors going on in here. And then in my try block, I'm going to be doing both reading and writing at the same time. I want to read the information from my original file. I want to store that information in a new copy. So I'm reading and then writing to a new copy. Now, I could just copy and paste here, but what's the fun in that? Why don't we do that with code? And it's going to unlock other feature abilities for us to do other things as well. So to be able to read, I need a new scanner that I call scan. And I'm going to get the information from file1, that file I input. Let's import my scanner. I also need to be able to write. So I need to create a file writer. You know what, let's actually just define this all together like we did before. A print writer that in its constructor, we are going to be accessing a new file writer. Did I type something wrong here? Oh, I forgot to send for the file writer. In this file writer, we are going to be writing to our file2 in our file writer. There we go. Almost forgot. So file2 will be the file that we're writing to. File1 is the file that we're reading from. Now, also to do this, I want a string. I'm going to call my string data that I'm able to use as a temporary storage of the information from scanner that I will then output. Let's see what this is going to look like. While my scanner has information still remaining in it, while it's still able to access some data, I'm going to be assigning to my string data the next word. I actually want to pause here for 1 sec and talk about something about how this actually gathers the individual words. We'll notice that we have a whole bunch of different words and different lines here. How does this know to just take one word and then stop? and then the next it takes the next word and then stop. What tells it to stop? Well, that's something called the delimiter. The delimiter is the rules for when next or where the scanner is actually going to recognize there's a new piece of information, a new token that it's interested in. And naturally, the delimiter in the scan class is the white space that comes after a new line or a break in the line. You actually are able to customize the delimiter. Maybe instead of having white space, you'd want it to have like backslashes or maybe quotation marks, or there's lots of different options you can use for the delimiter. And if you want to play around with that, it's something that if you're feeling a little bit more advanced, then you can actually access a method called useDelimiter. And inside of it, you're going to define the string that will be that delimiter. Perhaps it's backslash, perhaps it's some other character. It's naturally just white space. So we don't have to define that ourselves. That's happening already when we use scan next. But that's something to take a peek at if you have different types of data being stored in a file, or you want to include something like between each individual line that you add, a comma or something like that. But that's what is going on in the background, this delimiter. I'm going to erase that for now. Just a bit more information to understand this, what's going on in this scenario here. So each time there is data, I'm going to gather it and temporarily store it under the string data. Now what I want to do is I want to write each piece of information, each new word, to my new file, the new copy that I have. So what I'm simply going to do is I'm going to say output write data. The data that I've gathered from next is going to be written as a new piece of data in my new file. However, my new file isn't going to know that there is that white space or that new line, because the scan just recognizes it as a new word but doesn't actually copy it into my string. So I need to make sure that I output a new line if I want each of those words to be on their own line when I export a new copy of a file. That ends my logic for this, but before I'm done, I want to make sure that I take my file writer and I close it. Oh, sorry, I want to take my output and close it. I named it something different here. And I want to take my I think that's all I actually need to close here, as far as I can recall right now. So we are going to jump in here and try this out. So what should we be expecting to be seeing here? Well, we should, first of all, need to, when we're actually creating or accessing this method up here, we've called this copy. I need to send it two pieces of information. The file that I'm accessing, which is going to be all words, and then the file name that I want to create as the copy. Let's call this all words copy. Very creative of me. And when I run this, we're going to be sending these file names into our method. It's going to be scanning from the first file, our all words, and then it's going to be writing to our second file, the all words copy, taking all the information from the first and dropping it into the second. So before we actually do that right away, I'm going to exit all this here. Don't save the changes. Note in my project file, I only have all words here. But when I hit run, tab over here really quick, all words copy has now been made. Now, did I copy the wrong one originally? We're going to see that I made a silly here and I left, let's see where this ends up. I didn't actually copy that full dictionary. So I'm just going to pop over in the background here because, as you guys know, I had my wisdom teeth taken out. My brain is not at 100% right now. But let me fix this and we'll take a quick peek here at the actual thing happening. Maybe just skip forward a sec. I don't want to have to go back in and edit all this. So we're going to jump in here and snag a copy of all words that actually has the information in it. And drop it in here, just so that we can for sure see this working. You should definitely try this out on your own to make sure that you have your own hands-on experience with doing it. So here, all words, a copy that actually has the full dictionary in it. The file name is the same, so if I run this again, it should do the same as before. And in this case, oh, here's what my issue was. Oh, I'm dumb sometimes. Clearly I'm having a bad night. I forgot that I'm still running the right text up here. I'm just gonna comment this out because what's happening is I'm doing this first and I'm replacing all the text. So this is actually a good error for me to have made because it shows really clearly why this is so useful. I originally was just editing the file, but I replaced all of its contents so that when I tried to access it again, it had its contents replaced. So let's not do that this time. Let's actually only run the copy, and maybe actually I want to do this afterwards. That would make a lot of sense. So I'm going to run this. It's going to make a copy of all of the dictionary into my copy, and then the original file that I then ran after to write to has had its information replaced. Luckily, I made this copy beforehand this time, not afterwards, so that it copied the dictionary and then edited the information of the first file. Hopefully this helps you in your second section of exercises so that you can actually have copies being made before you play around with information. And there's many different ways you can utilize this strategy to be able to do all of your output processing in more intelligent ways, causing less troubles. And I'm curious to see how you utilize it in different scenarios for different purposes. That's all I'm going to say about this for now. Good luck with it. Let me know if you need help. Catch you next time.